Good morning. It's another Guilao 60 video coming from the University of Guangxi, or Guangxi Daxi in Nanning, China. Today we're going to be talking about visas versus resident permits. Currently I'm here on a resident permit, a 2-year resident permit. The reason why I can get a resident permit is my wife has an elderly father in Nanning, and we help take care of him. He lives in our home, and we put up with him. Or at least I do. Wei Feng, that's her dad, so that's the way it is. The pros and cons of having a temporary, or not a temporary, it's a resident permit. The resident permit lets you stay here for 2 years. They say that there are 5-year permits, but I've never seen one. I've never heard of anybody getting one. I think you have to be a rocket scientist or do something good for China to get something like that. When I went to the immigration, well, actually this is the 3rd resident permit I've been on, so I'm in my just over 4th year of resident permits in China. The good thing about a resident permit, it's 2 years. Well, that's a bad thing about a resident permit, it's 2 years. But you don't have to leave every 90 days or 180 days, where a visa, they have time limits on how long you can stay in the country. With the resident permit, it gives you all the rights of a Chinese person. You don't need a visa to enter the country. You can stay as long as your resident permit allows you to stay. If it's a 2-year permit, you can stay for the full 2 years without having to leave the country. With a visa is a ticket to get into the country. Say they have 10-year visas now, which they never had 10-year visas when I started coming to China. It was either 6 months, a year. I never did get a 2-year permit. And what happens when you overstay a visa, that's a story in itself. Happened to me back in 2011. Anyway, you get a visa, say a 10-year visa, and you have to leave every 6 months or 180 days. You either have to go to Hong Kong from here or Vietnam, which is about an hour and a half away. But to go to Vietnam, you're looking at a 400 RMB visa to enter Vietnam. So chances are Hong Kong is better, especially now that they have the high-speed trains in China. It takes about 3.5 hours between Nanning and Hong Kong. You got to go to Guangzhou and then down to Hong Kong, but it only takes about 3.5 hours on the train, which is sort of nice compared to what it used to be. In 2011, I was on a 1-year visa, and I was required to leave the country every 90 days. At that time, my wife's mother passed away, so we weren't really thinking about visas and such. So after we did all of the ceremony stuff and whatever, I thought, well, I'm going to go get a Chinese driver's license. You notice I'm sweating here. It's right now it's 28 degrees, but with the Humidex it's 34 degrees, and it is just hot here today. Anyway, so I go into the police station because you have to get a document from the police station to show the DMV, or the driving licensing place, that you have an actual residence in China, which was good. But when I went in there, the officer said, well, let me take a look at your passport. So my passport, like dumb Canadian, and he says, he looks at me and says, your visa expired 6 days ago. Oh, so now I'm in uncharted territory. I didn't know what to do. So they say, you have to go over to the immigration department. It's only about 5 blocks from where we live. So I trottle over there, big smile on my face, thinking, yeah, they're going to fix it for me. A little bit of a mistake. So they take me upstairs, and there's a lockup up there. So they take me upstairs and they say, okay, you're out of status. And I was talking to a younger immigration officer, and he says, okay, there's a 3,000 RMB fine. and I wasn't in the mood to pay 3,000 RMB to immigration for overstaying a visa for 6 days. So I started into the Chinese bartering, and I got them down to 1,000 RMB. Okay, they accepted 1,000 RMB as a fine. So even if you're dealing with the government, you can still barter in China. So what happened is they gave me they charged me 1,000 RMB fine and then a 700 RMB to reissue a special visa. And getting a visa in China, you can't get a visa in China unless it's a special visa. This one was for 30 days. It gave me 30 days to leave the country. And there wasn't really a black mark on my name in China because I overstayed the visa for 6 days, because I explained exactly what was going on during that time period, and they understood. See, with visas and resident permits, it's up to the individual what works for them best. With us, because when we come here, we don't want to think about, oh, in 90 days I have to leave the country. Oh, in 180 days I have to leave the country. We just like to come here and relax and sometimes we'll go on trips and sometimes we won't. So, but we don't have to think about it. The 10-year visa would be nice, but whenever we get a resident permit, we're in China. To get a visa, you have to leave the country to get a visa. You have to either go to Hong Kong or to Vietnam or get it in your own country before you come to China. Because you can't get a visa because it's an entry into the country. How do you get into the country if you don't have a visa? So it's a catch-22. So that's there are work permits for teachers and such, but because I've never worked in China, I don't have any knowledge of work permits and how they operate. So I'm not going to try to pull the wool over people's eyes and say, oh, I know about this, because I don't. I've only ran on visitor visas and resident permits in China. I'm in Nanning now. It's hot. I love this city. This is a beautiful place to live. If anybody out there is looking for a place in China to come and visit, Nanning City is the place to be. It is one of the most beautiful cities I've ever been in, and I've been a lot of places. Anyway, that's a short ditty about resident permits and visas. If you like this video, as always, comment, like, or subscribe. Let me know what you're thinking, and that's it for Gweilao 60. See you next time.